It is a Friday afternoon in January. The air above Hexham is chilly and grey, and the town centre is filling with teenagers doing what teenagers do, browsing shops, laughing too loudly, passing time before the weekend. Among them stands a 15-year-old girl called Holly Newton. Her coat is pulled close and she is smiling. For everyone around her, it looks like an ordinary afternoon, with nothing visible to suggest that her life is about to change forever in a way nobody could imagine. She has no idea that someone is already observing her from across the road. She does not know he followed her from school. She does not know he is carrying a knife. What took place in Priestpopple, Hexham, on January 27, 2023 would shock England. A 15-year-old girl who had only tried to leave a relationship was attacked in daylight in a crowded town centre while her friends were nearby. This is the complete story of Holly Newton, and the troubling reality of what can happen when obsession gets confused with love. Holly Newton was raised in Haltwhistle, a small, peaceful town in Northumberland, in northeast England. It was the sort of place where everybody knew everybody, where children grew up outdoors and families came together at weekends. Holly belonged naturally in that world. She was warm, lively and truly kind, the sort of person who would willingly go out of her way to help a friend without needing to be asked. She attended Queen Elizabeth High School in nearby Hexham, where teachers described her as quiet yet hard-working, someone who arrived, made the effort and got on well with everyone around her. She was not the loudest person there, but people were naturally drawn to her because she was someone who genuinely listened. Beyond school, Holly had interests that kept her occupied and cheerful. She loved dancing. She played sports. She had a tight circle of friends she would spend time with in town after school, visiting shops along Priestpopple, getting food, simply being 15 and free. She loved animals and was especially attached to the family cat. Her mother, Michaela Trusler, would later tell the court that she was a happy teenager who would do anything for anyone. Those who knew Holly described her as independent for her age, not recklessly so, but because she had a strong understanding of who she was and what mattered to her. She was loyal. She was compassionate. She was the friend who appeared when it counted. That loyalty and warmth made her profoundly loved by those around her, yet tragically, it may also have made it more difficult for her to realize how dangerous her situation had become, because she was someone who always tried to find the good in others first. That was Holly Newton, a girl who laughed easily, cared deeply about those around her, and had an entire life ahead of her. She was 15 years old and had done nothing wrong. She had only tried to leave a relationship that no longer felt safe. Holly met Logan MacPhail through Army Cadets, a youth organisation in which both teenagers took part. At first, there was nothing troubling about their connection. They were young people sharing an activity, becoming acquainted. A relationship formed, and for some time, it seemed like an ordinary teenage romance. But over approximately 18 months, circumstances started to change. According to evidence later given at trial, MacPhail became more controlling. He kept track of Holly's social media accounts. He became fiercely jealous of her other friendships. He tried to separate her from the people around her. Friends later told investigators that Holly had seen the change and that the relationship had begun feeling uncomfortable, pressured, and suffocating. Holly made the choice that anyone in her position should have been free to make. She ended the relationship. She wanted space. She wanted to carry on. She was 15 years old and tried to do the healthy, courageous thing by walking away. Nobody should have had to defend that decision. Nobody should have had to bargain their way out of a relationship. She said no, and that should have been where it ended. What came next was not acceptance, it was escalation. MacPhail started contacting her again and again after the breakup, despite what she wanted. Holly reportedly told friends she thought he was stalking her. She felt uneasy. She was looking over her shoulder. Her mother, Michaela, became concerned enough by what she was hearing to contact police. She worried her daughter was being relentlessly pursued by someone unable to let go. And she was right. Logan MacPhail was 16 years old when the attack occurred. He had grown up in the Northeast and had taken part in Army Cadets, where he first encountered Holly. People who knew him described a young man who experienced emotional difficulties. He had been diagnosed with autism and learning difficulties and had a history of struggling to control intense emotions. Those diagnoses would later feature in the legal discussion surrounding his case. Yet what people around him had noticed before any of that was much simpler and more immediate. He could not accept rejection. After Holly ended the relationship, something inside him changed, not toward sadness or acceptance, but toward fixation. People who knew him through cadets and social circles had already started noticing the difference. He was fiercely jealous. He was emotionally unstable. Following the breakup, he became consumed by his fixation on Holly, someone who, according to every account, simply could not accept that she had decided to move forward without him. In the days before January 27th, the situation was clearly worsening. MacPhail continued contacting Holly again and again despite the breakup. He appeared near her home. He followed her movements. Holly felt uneasy and frightened. She had told her friends. She had told her mother. The adults around her were treating the situation seriously. But the process of intervention was moving slowly, and time was running short. On the night before the murder, January 26, 2023, MacPhail travelled to Holly's house and remained outside for hours. He attempted to persuade her to come outside. She refused. She remained indoors. Eventually, he left, but the fact that he had remained outside her home for so long, in the darkness in January, waiting for a girl who had already told him their relationship was finished, reveals the depth of his fixation. This was not a teenager dealing with heartbreak. This was something considerably more dangerous. That night would later become important evidence of deliberate, premeditated stalking, a pattern that had been developing for days and was now approaching its breaking point. Holly's mother had already contacted police with her concerns. She knew something was seriously wrong. She was attempting to secure help for her daughter. She had arranged to speak with officers, but that meeting had not yet taken place. January 27th arrived before anyone had the opportunity to intervene. Friday, January 27th, 2023. Classes finished at Queen Elizabeth High School at approximately 3:25 in the afternoon. Students streamed into the cold January air, backpacks across their shoulders, making weekend plans. It was the sort of ordinary Friday most people would forget by Sunday, uneventful, familiar, quietly cheerful. Holly Newton left school alongside her friends and went into Hexham town centre, toward Priest Popple, the main shopping street. She was laughing, talking, completely relaxed. She could not have known that someone had already planned the day before she had even passed through the school gates. At approximately 3:45 p.m, Logan MacPhail reached Hexham. Before leaving, he had already taken a kitchen knife from his home. Investigators would later establish that he had travelled to Hexham specifically to find Holly, not accidentally, not on impulse. He had made a choice. He had gone into his kitchen, taken a knife, and travelled to the town where he knew she spent Friday afternoons. He concealed the knife in his clothing as he entered the town centre and started searching the crowds. At around 4:10 p.m, CCTV footage showed MacPhail scanning the crowds. He saw Holly and her friends near the shops. From there, he began following them, moving along the streets behind them, keeping Holly within his view, but never approaching. For nearly an hour, he watched her laughing, watched her speaking with her friends, watched her simply being a teenager on a Friday afternoon, completely unaware that she was being followed. CCTV cameras documented his movements in remarkable detail. He was seen walking around, changing position, moving closer, then retreating. At one point, he briefly vanished from the camera's view. Police believed he was changing position so he could get ahead of Holly's group. Prosecutors would later characterize this for the jury as a calculated and deliberate pursuit. Not a young man overcome by emotion, but someone sufficiently cold to wait, sufficiently patient to plan, and sufficiently dangerous to act. By 4:50 p.m, several of Holly's friends had begun making their way home. She stayed in the town centre with a male friend. MacPhail remained close by, watching and waiting. By 5:05 p.m, he acted. He moved toward them. Witnesses said he asked Holly if she would talk with him alone. It is a detail that remains with you, that even then she agreed. She moved away to speak with him. Perhaps she believed she could talk sense into him. Perhaps she believed a conversation might finally end things. Holly headed toward a narrow alley beside Priest Popple. Her friend stayed close by. Witnesses said the exchange seemed tense. Investigators later believed they argued over the breakup, that MacPhail still had not accepted it, and that the confrontation rapidly turned heated. What happened next took roughly 60 seconds. At approximately 5:10 p.m, MacPhail drew the knife from his clothing. The violence that followed lasted under a minute, but it was devastating. Holly sustained dozens of wounds during a frenzied, sustained attack. She fought back. Forensic evidence later established defensive injuries across her hands and arms. The physical evidence showed she had attempted to shield herself from the blade, tried to protect herself, tried desperately to survive. A teenage boy nearby heard the commotion and rushed toward them. He attempted to drag MacPhail away from Holly. Rather than stopping, MacPhail turned the weapon toward him, stabbing him several times. The boy suffered serious injuries. Doctors would later state that he was lucky to survive. His intervention may have stopped the assault from going on even longer. At approximately 5:12 p.m., the attack ended. The alley that had been a quiet space moments earlier was suddenly a crime scene. Bystanders screamed. People hurried from the main street toward the noise. Some attempted to help Holly. Others tried restraining MacPhail. Emergency calls started pouring in at 5:13 p.m. Priest Popple, a street where teenagers gathered every Friday to socialize, to enjoy being young, to simply live ordinary lives, had just become the setting for something nobody there would ever forget. Paramedics reached the scene by 5:17 p.m. and immediately began treating Holly. She was rushed to the Royal Victoria Infirmary in Newcastle, where trauma specialists fought desperately to save her. The injured boy was treated at the scene as well before being taken to hospital, where surgeons operated on his stab wounds. Doctors would later say he was lucky to survive. Despite everything the medical teams did that evening to save her, Holly Newton died from her injuries. She was 15 years old. She had done nothing wrong. She had simply attempted to leave. It is important to stop here for a moment. This took place on a crowded street on a Friday afternoon in a town filled with people. Witnesses were present, bystanders were nearby, and yet a 15-year-old girl died before anyone could prevent it. That is the frightening reality of how quickly targeted violence can happen, and why intervention at an early stage, before it reaches such a point, matters enormously. Logan MacPhail was arrested later that evening. He had not gone far. During police questioning, he made a claim that would shape much of the trial's opening proceedings. He said he had no memory of carrying out the attack. He claimed he had gone to Hexham not intending to harm Holly, but intending to hurt himself. He said the knife had been taken for self-harm. Investigators spent weeks assembling the case against him. They had considerable evidence. The CCTV coverage was extensive. It showed him reaching Hexham with a weapon, seeing Holly and following her around the town for nearly an hour before attacking. It showed him systematically stalking her through a public area while a knife remained concealed in his clothing. The footage clearly challenged his claim that the attack was spontaneous. Digital evidence taken from phones and social media recorded the continuing contact and fixation after the breakup. Witnesses supported what Holly had told her friends, that she had felt stalked and frightened. The kitchen knife was linked back to his home. Every item of evidence led toward the same conclusion. This had been planned. The trial was held at Newcastle Crown Court in 2024. It lasted 6 weeks. The prosecution laid out a clear, detailed account. MacPhail had knowingly armed himself, knowingly travelled to Hexham, knowingly followed Holly through the town centre, and knowingly attacked and killed her when the opportunity came, all because he could not accept that she had ended the relationship. The defence argued that MacPhail's autism and learning difficulties had impaired his ability to deal with the rejection and manage his emotional reaction. They argued that the attack had happened spontaneously rather than being premeditated, and that his claimed intention was self-harm, not harming Holly. The jury rejected those arguments. Following careful deliberation, they returned a guilty verdict on the murder charge. MacPhail was likewise convicted of wounding with intent for stabbing the boy who had attempted to intervene. In November 2024, the judge sentenced him to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 17 years. The judge called the attack deliberate, vicious, and motivated by jealousy. Holly's mother gave a victim impact statement in court that left the courtroom silent. She spoke about arriving at the crime scene. She spoke about the aftermath. She spoke about what it means to lose a 15-year-old daughter to a boy who simply could not accept letting her go. Everything she said reminded the court that the person at the heart of this case was not merely a legal argument or forensic exhibit. Her words made clear that behind every piece of evidence was a daughter, not an abstract case, whose absence would remain with her family long after the courtroom proceedings had long since ended. She was an actual girl with an actual family and an actual future taken from her on a cold Friday afternoon in January. Forensic and legal analysis. From a forensic perspective, this case presented several factors that made the prosecution's task comparatively straightforward. Although no less disturbing, the CCTV coverage across Hexham town centre was extensive, capturing MacPhail's movements in remarkable detail. Investigators could reconstruct his entire afternoon, including his arrival, stalking pattern, positioning, and the moment of the attack. That footage alone destroyed the defence's argument that the violence was spontaneous. The number of wounds recorded in Holly's autopsy matters for several reasons. First, it establishes the length and brutality of the assault. One impulsive act does not ordinarily create injuries on that scale. The severity of those wounds is consistent with sustained, concentrated violence. Second, forensic experts found a pattern known to criminal psychologists as overkill, meaning much more force than necessary, indicating that the assault was fueled by intense emotional rage rather than a calculated desire to simply end a life quickly. The defensive injuries to Holly's hands and arms are equally crucial. They establish that Holly remained conscious through a significant part of the attack, fought back, and experienced the assault instead of being immediately incapacitated. This carries both medical and legal importance. It demonstrates the prolonged character of the violence. A particularly important legal issue in this case concerned classification. Because Holly was 15, her killing was not automatically classified as domestic homicide under UK law as it existed at the time. Since then, her family has campaigned strongly for that to change. They argue, persuasively, that the patterns present here mirror those found in adult domestic homicides: coercive control, stalking, refusal to accept a relationship's ending, and targeted, lethal violence. The victim's age does not alter the nature of the crime. Psychological profile, what the evidence tells us. The psychology of this case follows a well-established pattern seen in intimate partner violence. That pattern does not become less dangerous simply because the people involved are teenagers. If anything, it can become more dangerous because warning signs are more easily dismissed as ordinary teenage drama. MacPhail displayed several behaviours that mental health professionals and domestic violence researchers recognise as high-risk warning signs in abusive relationships. These included obsessive jealousy, monitoring a partner's social media, efforts to isolate the partner from friends, refusing to accept the relationship's end, increased contact after the breakup, and physical surveillance, such as waiting outside the victim's home. These are not ordinary signs of heartbreak. They are indicators of coercive control and, in many cases, warning signs that precede violence. At the centre of this behaviour is the psychological concept known as rejection sensitivity, taken to an extreme, a profound inability to accept that another person has chosen to leave. For some individuals, rejection can trigger a cycle of entitlement and rage. The reasoning, if it can be called that, becomes, if I cannot have you, nobody will. Holly's existence as someone who had moved forward becomes, within this distorted mindset, an intolerable threat. The stalking during the hours before the attack also warrants psychological attention. MacPhail did not assault Holly immediately after seeing her. He followed her for nearly an hour. He waited. He changed his position. He selected his moment. This is not the conduct of someone caught in an uncontrollable emotional breakdown. It is the conduct of someone focused, patient, and deliberate. The planning itself reveals something important about his state of mind. He was not overcome by emotion. He remained in control of himself, using that control to pursue someone who had simply tried to be free from him. This case also raises serious questions about how young people are taught to identify unhealthy relationship dynamics. Holly told friends she believed she was being stalked. Her mother reported her concerns to police, yet the system failed to act quickly enough. The difficult reality is that coercive control, particularly among teenagers, remains chronically overlooked, undertreated and underfunded. Holly's story demands change. Case summary and closing reflection. Let us return to the timeline because the facts surrounding this case are as unmistakable as they are heartbreaking. Holly Newton was a 15-year-old girl from Northumberland who met Logan MacPhail through Army cadets. After an 18-month relationship, she ended it. He refused to accept that. He started following her, tracking her online activity, waiting outside her house, and repeatedly contacting her despite her wishes. Her mother reported her concerns to police. A meeting with officers had been arranged. Before it could take place, on January 27, 2023, MacPhail removed a kitchen knife from his home and went to Hexham. He located Holly in the town centre. For nearly an hour, he followed her. He went up to her, asked for a private conversation, and then assaulted her with violence the court would later call frenzied and devastating. A boy who attempted to assist her was also seriously hurt. Holly was taken urgently to hospital, where she later died. MacPhail was arrested that evening. During the 2024 trial, he was found guilty of murder and given a life sentence with a minimum term of 17 years. The judge described the assault as deliberate, vicious, and motivated by jealousy. Since then, Holly's mother has become a campaigner for legal reform, seeking official recognition of teenage relationship violence as domestic abuse under UK law. Holly Newton deserved the freedom to leave. She deserved a future. She deserved to have her refusal respected. What happened to her was not a crime of passion. It was an act of possession, carried out by someone who believed he owned a person who had decided to be free. If this case leaves us with one lesson, it is that the warning signs existed and people could see them. Jealousy that controls, isolation that chokes, contact that continues after the word no. None of these are signs of love. They are warning signs of danger, and they occur in teenage relationships just as they do in adult ones. If you are watching this and any part of Holly's story feels familiar, if something about that relationship dynamic resembles what you are experiencing, or what a friend has told you, please take it seriously. Speak to someone, tell a trusted adult, reach out to a helpline. Holly's mother has spent the years since her daughter's death working to ensure that this story helps save lives and prevent another family from suffering. Every case leaves questions behind. What's your verdict? If you enjoyed this investigation, like the video and subscribe to Crime Scene Files for more true crime stories. Tell me your theory and where you're watching from in the comments now. Click the next case on your screen, because the truth is never as simple as it seems.